Today we're looking at Robert Oster's Blue Night. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Robert Oster's Blue Night is a blue ink, and my thought would have been blue-black, but it's a blue ink. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into a different pen for a day. Then I put it into a Noodler's Ahab with a modified flex nib to take my notes for this video. But before we get to the writing samples, let's take a look at the sciencey bits. And up first is the chromatography, and I agree with Vita that doing multiple chromatographies has taught me a ton. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down, immediately dunk it in the water for 10 to 15 seconds, and we see a very cool light purple working its way up all the way, and then it turns blue with a very dark blue line. So cool. The one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And we see this purple working across a light blue and a very dark blue at the top, because it looks exactly the same. Now, resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to hold up on the paper, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean out of your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, we see that this ink does not like to be reactivated at all. The highlighter makes it feather all over the place disgustingly. Water reactivates it, pulls a majority of it up off the page. Pen Flush does the same thing, just a little bit more. Now, bleach leaves a white dot behind. Nothing there. But I think you would only need to use water to get this out of your pen. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Robert Oster's Blue Night has a viscosity of 2.6, which makes it a very average flow. Very easy to use. It's the drier side of viscosity. Wow, I couldn't get my words. To find my average dry time, I use my writing samples on the extra fine and medium nib done on Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. And Robert Oster's Blue Night has an average dry time of 18 seconds. Super normal performing in every way ink. Now let's get to the writing sample. I have this ink in sample form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's look at Clairefontaine. Clairefontaine gives us no bleeding and no ghosting. With the 1.1, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, but we get some nice color variation. We see it going on with the R in Robert, the LU in blue, and the N in night, so we get some nice color variation with the 1.1 stub. With the extra fine, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, minor spots of color variation, spots where it gets a bit lighter. So it looks like at the end of a stroke, like at the top of quick, the top of the Q, the top of the U, the top of the I. So we get color variation. And so you can get it through your writing style. If you tend to, just sort of get a little lighter at the top, you're going to get some color variation. It's nice. Not a lot of other color variation. We do get it a little with the lazy. 11 seconds to dry. Medium gives us no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and almost no color variation. We have spots it gets a little lighter, like on brown. In the middle of brown, it gets a little lighter. At the beginning of jumps, it gets a little lighter. But that's about it. So there are spots, but not tons. So it seems like you could achieve color variation. We just don't seem to see it a whole lot. Looking at the scrubby, the medium shows us some color variation. The extra fine, not so much. And when it comes to the smear, I think you could recover this if you smeared it while you were writing. So Tomoe River. Tomoe River has no bleeding, has ghosting because it is Tomoe River. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade.
It's straightforward and there. When we go on to the extra fine has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and we lost the shade. But we often lose the shade with the Tomoe River. 19 seconds to dry. Medium gives us no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 34 seconds to dry. And when we look at the scrubby for both the extra fine and the medium on the Tomoe River, there's no expectation of shade because there's none in the scrub. And the smear, you would not recover if you smeared it. So Rhodia paper gives us no bleeding, no ghosting. With the 1.1, in the world, with the 1.1, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, nothing to write home about with it. The extra fine looks a tad bit lighter as a color, as a tone, a tad bit lighter. It has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, some shading, little bits of shading, only tiny bits of shading. The K in the quick is darker. My K's seem to wind up being a darker letter for me. My X's are often a darker letter, but it is not here. It looks like the R and over gets a little darker, and it looks like the top of the A in lazy is a little darker. So we have spots where it just gets a little bit darker. We see spots in the second. 9 seconds to dry with this ink. Medium gives us no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shade. 16 seconds to dry. Now when I look at the scrubby on the extra fine, I do see some color variation that's going on. Not so much with the medium. Or sorry, I'm saying that entirely backwards. No. Long day with the kids at school. With the extra fine, we have color variation. With the medium, not so much, which is what we got in our writing. So it matches there. When it comes to the smear, we would be able to see this with the smear. So I tested out Word Notebook. In the quest to find some different papers, I went to find Word Notebook, and I found that it bleeds. And it ghosts. But it doesn't touch the page underneath. As much as that's coming through, it didn't touch the page underneath, and that's the darkest spot. So for regular writing, this wouldn't be the worst. Looking at the top, where this is not the 1.1, this is the medium, that looks more like a very broad, and it feathers. So it feathers, it spreads. It has no halo, no sheen, no shade. The extra fine spreads to a medium. It has tiny feathers all over, but I don't think those tiny feathers are distracting as writing, but there is tiny feathering all over the place. No halo, no sheen, no shade. 1 second to dry. Looking at the scrubby, we expect no color variation with this ink, but as a walk-around notebook, because there's no smear with that 1 second to dry, this might not be the worst. Again, it didn't touch the page underneath, except in the scrubby. And, if you're writing spreads and feathers and all of that because you're just jotting something down real fast, that might not be the end of the world. I won't buy more Word notebooks, but that doesn't mean that people shouldn't. Now, I test a lot of different papers, and I chose to look at the 28-pound copy paper, the premium copy paper with this case, because premium copy paper has often done very, very well for me. In this case, we see the beginning of some bleeds. It didn't bleed through, but we see the beginnings down here. I ignore the scrubby part for that because I'm putting it on stupid thick. And only with the medium did we have ghosting. We didn't really have ghosting with the fine. So looking at the medium up top, we have definite spread, definite feathering, no halo, no sheen, and no shade. On the extra fine, we have definite spread, we have definite minor feathering all over the place. No halo, no sheen, no shade, 1 second to dry. The scrubby shows us we get no color variation, and on the smear test, it's going to survive. So this is not a horrible ink to use in a fine pen extra fine pen, especially if you can use a fine or extra fine that's dry. This is going to be very good if this is the paper you get to use at work. Just control your pen. Don't go after broads. Don't go after mediums. I didn't even test it with this stub because I didn't think it was going to stand a chance. And that's what I have for the writing sample.
Instead of finding inks that look like Robert Oster's Blue Night, I would prefer to find an ink that complements that color on the page. I've chosen Robert Oster's Maroon 1789 because of its red-brown color. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask if you've enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. So what do I think of Robert Oster's Blue Night? I think the color you get on the paper is very heavily affected by the nib and flow of the pen you are using. If you have a wetter flow, you get to get much darker, and a drier flow much lighter and more shading. That said, I am not in need of a bottle of this ink, but it's not because it's bad. It just comes down to personal preferences. Thanks for watching.